Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle. Today we have with us John McGarvey, who is the founder of DAO Labs. John, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mike. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. And give us a little bit of background of yourself. I see in the show notes you went from Wall Street to selling eggplants. So I'm really intrigued to hear how that transpired.
I wish I could go back in time sometimes and talk to that kid that went from Wall Street to the farms of sort of backwoods Florida. But in essence, my first sort of foray into the professional world after college was exactly that. I worked for a pretty large investment bank for a while in both Boston and then transitioned down to New York City. And moved into more of a private equity capacity. And it was in that experience that a mentor of mine said, if you really want to get good at the world of financial services and understanding not just how to model a cash flow statement, but really understand how does cash flow, because I can assure you and anyone listening, it's two very different skill sets. Then his advice was, well, why don't you go find a little company to run and really get your hands dirty and do exactly that, be the guy at 2 a.m. pacing the floors thinking about how we're going to, make this thing work. And so I found a small company that was the leader of all things eggplant. So it wasn't as though I ever decided, as a young child, I wanted to run a fried vegetable company. But long story short, they found me, I found them. And the next thing you know, I had moved down to a very small town in Florida where we had a small manufacturing facility and a group of hardworking people and a nice little brand. And it was first a consulting role, and then I wound up running the damn thing. And that's how one transitions from Goldman Sachs to the world of breaded fried vegetables.
So in that example, you were advised, go really dig in and learn the financial world by running a company. I'm sure that person intended, okay, now come back and you can be the better investment banker for that experience. But you never went back, right?
I never went back. And that was the goal. It was, if you really want to get good at this, go get your hands dirty and boomerang back. And so, life happens, and we never know sort of from a career perspective, it's not a linear line, right? You can't really plan these things. And kind of what happened, and to kind of preempt sort of, what are you doing now and where did you go? It was through that experience that I got to really know the natural products world. And we created a retail brand, and we were selling at Whole Foods and Safeway and Publix and kind of across the country. And during that time, I went like you, and I got an MBA. Did that on a part-time basis. And the next thing you know, we all of a sudden had this business. And during that period, to kind of address your specific question, I got the knack for it's really fun to own something, and not just from a corporate standpoint, but to own something from a brand and a product standpoint as well that you could hold in your hand. There's nothing more exciting and more exhilarating. This is a true example than, when I walked into a grocery store in Billings, Montana, on a vacation with my wife, this is 9 years ago, and there was our product in the frozen food aisle.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, how did that happen? And that's kind of a high that you don't necessarily experience on Wall Street necessarily. There's other highs, don't get me wrong, but that just kind of resonated with me, and it kind of was the fire in the belly that's like, well, keep doing the sort of consumer product thing and the entrepreneurial thing, and leave Wall Street to the guys that's their cup of joe. So it was kind of a circuitous route, but like I said, you don't plan these things; they just kind of happen.
Yeah, and of course, hindsight's 2020. So looking back on it, that's a neat way to connect those dots. But most people would never have said, "Here's the blueprint to go from this to there." So it's just neat to see how that works out. But then now with DAO Labs, which is like a Chinese-focused medicine company, you go from running an eggplant business to this. How do you make the jump from frozen eggplant, to a Chinese-focused company?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's like it's like, how more confusing of a career could you have?
Yeah.
So
if you thought that was crazy, wait till you see this.
Yeah, and God bless my wife because she hangs in there with me through all this. So to really answer that question, we got to back up a little bit. And I'm originally from Des Moines, Iowa. And in 1992, now you can age me here a little bit, I started high school, and my public high school, I'm very proud to say, offered as a foreign language option Chinese. And so in 1994, which was very unique at that time, particularly for Des Moines, Iowa, which isn't, San Francisco or New York City.
Right. New York City.
And so in 94, I ventured to China for the first time. And just like that entrepreneurial bug I was talking about, I kind of got this China bug in me. And I just kind of loved what I saw and the sort of experience of traveling and kind of harvesting and channeling my inner Anthony Bourdain. And it was just like, it was so cool. And so throughout my professional career and also through college, I continued to stay really close to China. Both continuing to study the language, and then I always found a reason, Mike, to go back there for one reason or another. So then we fast forward to me running the world's best eggplant company, and I was in the industry, and I was getting to know sort of the players and the dynamics. And I have an older brother who actually lived and still lives in China, and he called me one day, and he said, "Hey, I got a crazy idea for you, but at some point, you should get into the world of Chinese herbs and Chinese medicine, because no one owns that from a consumer standpoint." And I thought for a second and kicked the tires. Like, I don't say this often, but I think he's right. And so there's a big trade show that the entire natural food community kind of flocks to every spring in Anaheim, California, called the Natural Products Expo Industry. And around that time, we were there as a company exhibiting, but I walked the aisles and kind of assessed what was out there from that perspective. And there's a lot of herb companies, and the category of herbs from millennials to even, my parents' generation, it's very, very trendy. But no one was doing anything with this practice that was 2,500 years in the making, highly efficacious, practice around the world. In some cases, obviously in China, the world's most populous country, it's ingrained in the culture. But here in the U.S., it's here in the form of acupuncture, but there's not a consumer sort of brand that we can touch and say, this is, the brand is synonymous with Chinese medicine. So if people are still listening and they want to say, well, then how do you round the bases? We sold the eggplant company in 2014. I had to stick around with it for a while with our new owners. And it was during that period where I thought, well, what's next for John McGarvey in my career? And that's where a couple of buddies and I, and that were sort of entrepreneurs as well, sort of got the idea of let's do something about this. And so it started as a sidebar project. We found reasons to go back to China and vet suppliers, and we made some beta products and real lean type stuff. And then 2016 is when we got real serious about it. I said, if we're going to do this, now's the time. And we did. And so we spent much of last year, I guess now it would be 2 years ago, 2016, building the brand, creating the products, finding the right manufacturers, finding the right testing agencies to make sure this stuff is safe and not going to kill anybody in the process, God forbid. And we built the company, and proud to say just about a year ago we pressed play, and we're off to the races.
That's really, really neat. And one thing, as you were describing that, it makes me wonder, when you really made the foray and launch into this, because you mentioned just, a couple, 3 years, of momentum. Did you bring in a Chinese national to help with this? And where I'm going with that is my dad does some consulting in China, and he's said over and over that anything Western in China is really valued. So you are bringing Chinese to products to America. Well, were you working also from the other direction, where a Chinese national might be working with you to go, I'm working with an American venture, and then that maybe gave some fuel to the fire?
So your question is a really good one. We didn't go that route, but to kind of flip the question around, the biggest market for these products is still back in China. And your father-in-law, I can't recall, is exactly right. People will pay a premium for American-made products in China rather than the other way around. And there's a reason that Chinese tourists still flock to Rodeo Drive to buy Louis Vuitton handbags, even though they can still get them in Beijing. There's this perception that if it's made in China, or sold in China, it's of lesser quality or lesser value than the U.S. And so that's part of our longer term plan of like, how do we address that market? Because one of the things I'm very proud to say is, everything that we manufacture starts in China, but the actual manufacturing is done here in the U.S. And so we test and we're doing all that type of work. And perceptually, there's a value to that back to China for the same reason that they go to buy their handbags here. So we don't have a national working with us. What we do have, though, is one of the leading doctors of Chinese medicine is one of my co-founders. His name is Eric Karchmer, and he's an American Western guy, just like I am. But he also was early to China in the 90s, and he studied Chinese medicine there for about 8 years in Chinese, which is no small feat. So he's kind of our connector to the sort of region and the market over there. But it's right now it's a bunch of Western guys running a Chinese medicine company.
That's neat. And when you say Chinese medicine company, isn't it focused more on teas that then would deliver some, medicinal qualities?
Again, a really good question. So what we do is we are a Chinese medicine company, quote unquote, because that's what the sort of practice is called. If you go to an acupuncturist, if you go to an herbalist, that is Chinese medicine. But from an FDA and from an FTC standpoint, technically we're just a vitamin supplement, much like you buy at Whole Foods or at the vitamin shop. So the FDA looks at us from that standpoint. We have supplement facts panels on the back. But what we do is we go to China and we find the best, purest herbs possible. And then we go through a process here in the United States where we blend them and we add things to them and we add flavors and we put them into what I think is incredibly beautiful packaging that conveys what the benefit of the product is, I think, very clearly. And they're actually not teas. They're powders that one would add to cold or hot water, much like you would like an emergency or an airborne type product. They effervesce. But the function and the benefit is incredibly stronger and higher because of the fact that it's just not a vitamin C tablet. We have anywhere from 4 to 8 different herbs in these products that do everything from prevent colds. And I can tell you right now, and everyone listening, I am fighting a cold right now that is going through my household. I've not had a flu shot, and I'm the only one that over the last month has not picked this thing up. And we've got a formula that's absolutely incredible. It's a 2,500-year formula that prevents colds, and I got to be careful. It helps during cold season. Let's put it that way. Yeah. We have a digestive product. We have 2 products for women's health that are extremely powerful. And then this spring we're coming out with a line of products that'll help you sleep better.
Yeah, I think that's really neat because you've kind of taken from that that funnel from medicine to really teas but it's not really a tea. It's like a effervescent powder mix in, and so I think that really explains that well. One thing that I'm sure you get a lot is where's the proof? 2,500 years. Sure. Who cares? Whatever. But where's the snake oil come in? How do you respond to that?
We get that one all the time, and I love answering that question. I'm going to give you a quick anecdote. Tom Brady is now 40, won the Super Bowl last year, and played like he is just out of college, right? I mean, that guy looked hot. He's got a guy that works directly for him and the Patriots named Alex Guerrero, and he is a doctor of Chinese medicine. And he used the exact same expression that you did when he described his career path. And that is, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, people thought I was a snake oil sales guy. And now here I've got, the MVP of the Super Bowl who swears by this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so in as much as there is the whole belief and it's 2,500 years and whatnot, at the end of the day, it's still a very foreign concept and it is not clinically backed from a pure FDA or going through a traditional process perspective. Having said all that, we take obviously the authenticity of what we're doing very, very seriously. And so rather than just rely on anecdotes and the quarterback of the year saying, hey, this stuff works, we're actually working with a couple of research teams out of Hong Kong. That formula I mentioned on colds, for example, they published a wonderful piece of research that talks about, okay, the Chinese authorities used a version of this formula to prevent SARS in the early 2000s. Well, what the hell is going on here? And they've done some research that talks about how it affects and prevents bacterial and viral type of transmissions. And the whole idea of this is a very early study, but it is a legit study nonetheless, is we're trying to do more of that so we can say, all right, don't just take the 2,500 years and the fact that it's been around forever, as the peer authority. We're actually trying to dig deeper and provide some, conventional and modern day research behind it as well. And we think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that really is as well, because I think that many people in America have heard, ancient Chinese remedy or 2,500, and they sort of get it. But then when you can meld in some American research validations and testimonials, and in marketing, it's called social proof,
Sure.
So they don't need to know the person. They can just see that someone is going, this stuff is great. And I think that's really, really a great point. Where do you see the next step for your company? Because I think there's a temptation to just make a really broad product line, and then now it can get confusing. So how do you keep it tight and really clear?
A totally great point, and you're right. The temptation is always to go big quickly, and we have resisted that temptation, from day one. As you point out, we have 4 products, 5 formulas, whatever it is at the moment, and they're all highly segmented. We're creating something from scratch, sort of, when we talk about the brand and what we're doing from a company standpoint. And my experience and sort of what the sort of world of retail and consumer adaptation and whatnot will tell you is not all these products are going to work. What I didn't want to do, and right now the only place you can get this stuff is online, and that's by design. What I didn't want to do is spend a tremendous amount of money out of the gate, buy a bunch of retail space, only to have people say, I don't like this, there's something wrong with it, we've made a mistake, things of that nature. So we're only 10 months old as a company, we've spent that time really trying to perfect everything from our messaging to our flavor profiles to we actually threw some packaging away because we found that we just weren't communicating the things appropriately the way that we thought they should. So we're doing all of those types of things. And at the end of the day, we're trying to build something that's very, very valuable, but that's very special as well. There is no mandate right now that let's get this thing ramped up as big as possible and then get rid of it. Chinese medicine is as much a lifestyle as it is a practice, and the same kind of applies to what we're doing from a company perspective. We want to create something that first and foremost is helping people, but at the same time, it's got to be profitable, it's got to work, and just throwing a bunch of stuff out there, which is kind of the world I came from, right? I mean, in terms of getting stuff on the shelf, that's what I did for quite a while. And when it comes time to kind of eventually answer your question, McGarvey, we will pursue retail, but we want to be very, very strategic about the place, price point, all of those types of things, and obviously making sure that we've done all of our homework and made the correct changes so that, we increase our odds of success once we do get on the shelf.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, I'm sure a lot of people could make the point either way, have a broad product mix, have a tight one. But I like the idea of kind of taking that snail's pace, tortoise and hare kind of a concept and making sure you've got something good before you bring something else out. And it's kind of like shiny object syndrome. Let your customers not get confused. Keep them, focused on some of the main things. And I'm certain that we could have about a 4-hour conversation on your consumer research that you go through your customers and ask what they need, what they want, and then now that goes into what you're going to decide for the future. But is that, without getting too deep there, is that kind of what you do, is listen to your audience and see what they need?
Absolutely. I mean, the world that we operate in now, from social media to social proofing to just the ability to quickly throw out surveys and get responses, with our next round of products, so much of our consumer base went into telling us what they wanted it to taste like, what they wanted the price point to be, all that kind of stuff. And it was a heck of a lot easier to do and get than it would have been, obviously, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge point. Hey, so let's wrap up and let people know how they can learn more. I think I am correct in seeing on your website that you offer free samples, so let's give those details out as well.
Sure. We've got a sample program that we will be winding up here pretty soon just because we do that seasonality. So if that's not live by the time you get to the website, and the website is mydaolabs.com, and I'm going to spell it. It's mydaolabs.com, mydaolabs.com. If the complimentary sample program is paused at that time, everybody can use the discount code JOHN. That's my first name, JOHN, and they can save 20% just for your guests on today's show. So John at checkout, save 20%. But first go to the website and give us a look.
Excellent. Well, John, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful getting to know you today.
Hey, thanks so much.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.